Hi, this is Julie with a personal message before we begin. As this episode is released, we are just days away from the 2-year anniversary of the Charlottesville rally. I remember waking to the news the next day and deciding I had a responsibility to use my voice and the platform I'm building with the Mother's Quest podcast to pursue social justice. Many said yes alongside me, and the Women Podcasters in Solidarity initiative was born. First season episodes with a focus on anti-racism and police brutality are available at the website womenpodcastersinsolidarity.com. And episodes I recorded for our second season on the intersectional impact of gun violence are assembled on the latest Mother's Quest blog. Last weekend's events, 2 mass shootings within 24 hours, blasted our consciousness with the work still ahead and urgency to fight gun violence, and also the racism tied to these events. I hope you'll follow the links in the show notes to the episodes recorded and that they might shine some light on a path forward. Because as one of my guests on the podcast today, Desiree Lynn Adaway, says, we only get free together. Now on to the show.
And welcome to Mother's Quest, a podcast for moms like me ready to live our own truly epic life. I'm Julie Neal, a life and leadership coach, community builder, writer, and mom to 2 high-energy boys who challenge me to grow into my best self. I'll be right there. Where was I? In the months leading up to a big milestone birthday, I decided it was time to stop sidelining my dreams and realize that I'm the hero of my own journey. I knew I didn't want to do it alone, so I created this podcast to learn from other moms on their own quest, so their words of wisdom and lessons learned could help light the way for mine. I created this podcast for myself. Come along with me, and you'll find some treasures of your own.
What a joy and honor it was to hold space for a reflective conversation with 2 change-making women who have an epic friendship that has spanned more than 3 decades, Pamela Slim and Desiree Lynn Adaway. The 2 met on a hill in Northern California on the first day of college at the age of 18, and they have been best friends ever since. From completely different lived experiences, Desiree is a Black woman from the South Side of Chicago, and Pamela a white woman from Marin in the Bay Area. They unite around common interests and connections that transcend while never forgetting their differences. They each love each other's families fiercely and fight in their own unique ways and in their own communities for inclusion, equity, and justice. Mother to 2 grown daughters, Desiree is also a consultant, trainer, coach, and speaker, working to build resilient, equitable, and inclusive organizations in over 40 countries. She also teaches and advocates powerfully in the online space, and in a course I took from her and her partners called Diversity is an Asset. Pamela is an award-winning author, community builder, consultant, speaker, and small business strategist. Alongside being a stepmother to an adult son and raising her 2 teenagers, she's also the founder of the Main Street Learning Lab in downtown Mesa, where she works to increase the effectiveness, equity, and visibility of small business owners from marginalized communities, including women, people of color, and the LGBT community. Before I share more about my takeaways from this powerful conversation, I'm honored to introduce Nicole Lee with this episode's dedication.
Hello, I am Nicole Lee, founder of Inclusive Life and mom to Madison and Zinzi. I want to dedicate this episode to the collective of mothers who have helped me through my own mother's quest. What I know you will find in this episode featuring Pamela Slim and Desiree Adaway is that the mothers who seem to have it all together have one common asset, a collective of friends they can rely on for unflappable support, honest, caring critique, and a constant stream of love and devotion for both mom and kids. My collective holds space for me even when I can't for myself. So I know that even when my vision is cloudy, they can see the bright horizon. For me, Pam and Desiree, who I call Desi, are an essential part of my mom's collective. Since they have children that are older than mine, I often rely on them for the wisdom that comes with a little bit of distance from the antics of childhood. One night as we were having dinner, I was telling them how important it is to me that my daughters have access to a rich spiritual life. It has only been in my 40s that I have fully been able to express my spiritual gifts. It is my hope that my children will always have the freedom to be truly who they are as physical, emotional, and spiritual beings. At one point in the dinner, I said, "So what happens if I die? Who will make space for them to be fully themselves?" Pam puffed up and exclaimed, "What do you think we're here for?" For me, it was a moment of feeling deeply seen, deeply understood, and deeply held. Not just for me and my momentary fears, but also for the future of my daughters. You can't control everything in your life, but you can put out the intention to draw a collective of people to you that will stand by you, ride or die, no matter what. For me, my collective has made my mother's quest so rich and worthwhile. I sincerely hope you have a deep connection to a collective of mothers too.
Thank you, Nicole, for this beautiful dedication about the power of the collective and for all the ways that you have become an anchor, friend, and key part of my own collective, the Mother's Quest community. The way that you described being deeply seen, deeply understood, and deeply held was a theme that runs through this conversation as we explore the ways that Desiree and Pamela experience the epic guideposts in their lives and in their friendship. I felt like the entire conversation was a love letter to friendship and a call to action to risk being known, knowing others, expanding our perspectives, and championing diversity. I hope you'll listen with an open heart and leave this conversation as I did, committed to the specific challenges that Pamela and Desiree offered us, and inspired to show up every day as a better ally and a better friend. I'm Julie Neal, and this is Mother's Quest. Desiree and Pamela, welcome to the Mother's Quest podcast. It is really such a joy to have you both with me today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting us.
I love to frame at the beginning a little bit about what inspired me to have my guests on, because it is very much something that I follow my intuition and also my own desire for growth and learning when I decide who to invite. And having the two of you together was a spark of inspiration that came when I saw one of you posting for the other in honor of your birthday. And I was so moved and touched by this friendship of yours that I really wanted the chance to have you both on together and to also learn a little bit about your connection. And if it's okay, I wanted to read one of those messages that really impacted me. Can I start there?
Absolutely.
So this was a message, Pamela, that you wrote to Desiree on her birthday. And you said, "Today, my very best friend, Desiree Lynn Adaway, was born, unfolding a whole series of paths and choices, which eventually led us to meet on a hill in Northern California at the tender age of 18. To love her is easy, but to be loved by her is a joy that her friends and family feel deep in our souls. As our families have expanded, our kids love us and each other. She inhales life and exhales freedom with every breath. May she be loved, protected, filled with joy, and surrounded by abundance now and forever. I love you, Desiree, always and forever."
Oh my God, you're the best.
Get me all weepy first thing.
I'm totally sitting here crying.
Me too.
Seriously, me too. I mean, like, if there was ever a love letter, so much we talk about romantic love, but I think the love that is in friendship is immense. I have a best friend too, who we've been friends since I was 5, and we're still extremely close. And it is a relationship like none other, especially when you have journeyed through so many phases of your life with one another.
I would love to start with hearing how the two of you met one another on a hill and how you have each shaped one another in your lives.
You get to go first.
Oh, see, I was going to get you to go first. So we met as freshmen in college at a university which no longer exists. Shout out to World College West that was up on a hill in Marin County, California. And we met the first day of college and just immediately connected. Had been each other's main support since that moment in time. And Julie, you talked about, I think especially in this country, we really romanticize intimate relationships and and really put a lot of focus for women on having that intimate relationship. I can tell you my relationship with Pam and a couple other women in my life, if I'm being honest, the most fulfilling relationships that I've had. They weren't based in any kind of intimate love, but they were just based in a deep, abiding love and care and kinship and sisterhood. And my relationship with Pam has changed me in ways I don't even think I can articulate. Her love and care for me and my children and my family, and just her just unabashedly, being hashtag Team Desiree has been one of the greatest joys of my life. And, we tease about it, but it was literally decided years ago that there's nothing that she can ever do that will ever change that.
That's beautiful.
Likewise. Yeah. Well, and it's been such a gift to have a friendship over so many years. And one of the things, given our kind of social dynamics and the way that people tend to look at things, that's been an important dynamic in our relationship is the fact that we come from different places, right? And we've fought against sounds a little strong, but it's really easy to see this as the, ebony and ivory. Oh my gosh, how beautiful, right? Like, look, everybody can be friends, coming from different backgrounds and perspectives. And foundationally, of course, right, we can come from very different lived experiences and become friends. A way I think some people interpret, the friendship is because there is this deep connection that we have on just a fit side in terms of how our personalities are and our spirits are. It's also very much learning every day and understanding and celebrating and honestly speaking about also our social identities and where we come from. And not saying that's not important, because actually that's massively important as to what our different lived experiences are, on a daily basis. And I know over, what is it now, like almost 35 years of friendship, literally every day they say, the test of a relationship is where it does make you like think deeper and be a better person every day. And it's because I like to wake up every day, and it chokes me up again. But, like to be fully present and worthy and honest and free in the relationship, right? Kind of like earning each other's respect every day. Not ever taking anything for granted.
Every day.
Right? And knowing that as Desiree's work in particular has been evolving over time, and she's been delving so much more deeply into diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, identity, it has been so powerfully important to me as well to understand in ways there's no way I could understand at 18 how that has impacted our relationship, right? How it impacts our family, how it impacts everything. And it's just a really important part that I want to underscore is that is a part of any relationship, is that you do deeply understand and have interest in who each other is, and that where you're healthy and you're growing, that you change over time. And so like you have to change with each other. You have to provide space for that. And sometimes it means like really making yourself grow in order to still be able to be in relationship.
I'm really struck by something. I took your class, Desiree, Diversity as an Asset, and, got a much deeper understanding of what being an ally means, that it is not some place that you arrive, but it is a verb, and it's something you actually have to show up and do anew
every single day to the best of your ability.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just noticing the common thread there about friendship.
Absolutely. Like, I want to wake up every day and be worthy and deserving of Pam's friendship and her trust and her entrusting her children in my hands and their trust. And so it is. It's every day. It's like, how am I going to show up? How am I going to show up for her? How am I going to show up for her family? In what ways, do they need my support? And there are times, right, as part of doing this work where I get to show up and I get to be vocal. And there's other times where I show up and I'm just a listener, right? And I'm just there to help carry that load. I can't change the load, but I can help carry it to the best of my ability. And so that has always been, for me, one of the only ways that I know how to show up and be in right relationship and community with people that are really important to me is every day, what does it look like to deserve to be in right relationship with them?
I would love to hear a little bit, you mentioned that you do come from such different backgrounds. I'd love to hear a little bit about what your lives were like, each of you, before you arrived on that hill. What it was you think that enabled you to come to a place of common trust, to begin to build this relationship despite your differences?
Well, we have a lot in common. We were both exchange students in high school. Pam was in Switzerland. I was in Germany. Well, both when we were 16. And that year before we both went away were difficult years for both of us, right? Literally not knowing each other on different sides of the country. But we were both going through some very similar 16, 17-year-old growing pains. There are all these things that we do have in common. We're on our love of travel and being exchange students and studying, international development. Like all these wonderful things that we have in common, that our identities connect in real ways. And the one thing about Pam that I really adore, which I think she gets the balance just right, is that Pam never remembers that I'm Black, but she also never forgets that I'm Black. And that's the one that she uses to help keeps me safe in our relationship with each other. Because that's how I have to navigate the world. And so that's how she helps me navigate the world. And, and I mock her because she likes things like Bruno Mars, which I don't understand. Well, anybody listens to Bruno Mars and then, she does it and then thinks that it's hysterical to call me and be like, don't you want to listen to Bruno Mars with me? It feels like punishment. Okay.
And Desiree, where did you grow up? You mentioned you were on the opposite.
So I grew up in Chicago.
Okay.
And I grew up in a neighborhood as opposite from Marin County where Pam grew up. I grew up in the south side of Chicago, an all-Black neighborhood. And our lived experiences. My parents were laborers. Her parents were professionals. Just two very different lived experiences. Her dad was mayor of the town where she grew up in at one point in town. And so, just two very different households and lived experience, but so many similarities. And when we were at this little hippie college, I like to call it a commune with financial aid. When we were going there and attending school, we had to do a year abroad. And at first I was going to Nepal and Pam was always going to Mexico. And I kept saying I was going to Nepal and I kept, doing all the things that would take me to Nepal. And then one day I looked up and I was like, but wait, your support system is actually going to Mexico.
So you ended up going to Mexico?
So I went to Mexico and it was the best decision ever.
I forgot about that. I totally forgot that you were
I was supposed to go to Nepal.
I know, right? Oh, thank God.
And I thank God. Could you imagine I've been in Mexico without me?
No.
Of course not. Right? Like, what was I thinking? I was just being ornery, I think. But when it came down to it, like my favorite teacher was teaching in Nepal. Pam was in Nepal. Like people that I really cared about. All of them were going to Mexico. Everybody's going to Mexico. And I was going to Nepal. And I was like, what are you doing? Go to Mexico. And so
Wow. So you had that shared experience as well.
Oh, yes. And we've had many since then.
That's right. Well, I always learn something new in kind of hearing you describe it, because I feel really similar in there is something that just is a chemistry within relationships that you can't really explain, that I feel like was there from the beginning. Sometimes I try to remember like the exact moment in which I met you, because we were all, I don't remember. It was at camp, right? Where there's like that weird,
right? Yeah, it was that
the campus was
weird camp. Oh my God.
So, like as the movie, with movie, like I can't remember the first moment I glanced across the I need to like go under hypnosis to remember that. But really, there was no work. Like it was an instant. There's something just very magical. And, in terms of a spiritual connection of just like, there's something about Desiree's energy that I was just so deeply drawn to instantly, like that feeling of familiarity. So who knows, right, what that comes from, but like, it was just there. So that was a part that was never like a challenge to work on. But then over time, as we've said, it's the same reflection I have, I think, for my identity of being really like witness for who I am and being able to hold space. And now my kids do the same thing, which is always a source of comfort and hilarity that I appreciate, is where it's not denying the fact that I am a white girl that grew up in Marin County, California, right? And I like pop culture, and I have all of these also different social identities and privilege that's related to that. With my kids, I enjoy my husband's Navajo, so our biracial will have all kinds of conversations, and they'll, be like, Mom, you're so white. And I'm like, you're right. I am. Like, this is who I am. And you're going to see me doing things and behaving in ways that I really want you to be able to call me right on my behavior if I'm doing something that is related to living with that identity. And for things that are not harmful, I'm also not going to apologize, because that is who I am. That is the only person who I know how to be, is coming from my lived identity. And I have been in deep relationship with people from different backgrounds, but that does not mean that changes who I am. And so like being able to be that, to be able to have very truthful, honest conversation, to talk about things in a straightforward way. And I really think for me, it's been helpful to be like both with Desiree and with my husband, Daryl. They're both like just very straightforward, no bullshit kind of people, where I can't flop around in like consternation and fragility for a very long time. They're both very empathetic, right? And love me very much. But it's also really good to have people who are like, okay, you had your 10 minutes. Like, what are we doing about it? Like if we're not just going to let you flop around forever. And that's been really helpful. Like, I just find one of the things I appreciate the most from Desiree and from my husband is just having a really clear analysis and not letting me sit and stew too long.
And I will say this, like Pam has that strength and she has it, but she doesn't always see that sometimes. And I think the one thing I love about her is I think she sees me clearer than I see myself. And I see her clearer than she sees herself. And I see that strength in her. It's so clear to me. And I'm like, what are you flopping around for, dude? Like, you got, like, get up. You got what it takes. Like, nobody has to give you anything. Nobody has to talk to you. You know what to do. Like, what do you want to do with this? And I know she has it. And I know she can always handle whatever comes her way. I absolutely have no doubt about that.
I'm so moved by what you're both sharing. And it is reminding me, I come from 20 years of youth development and community building work. And one of the principles of the organization where I worked for over 15 years was this idea that community and great work in the world comes from being known and knowing others. And what you're both describing is this just, being able to truly see and to truly know one another in your full humanity, in the things that you have in common, but also the things that are real, that are different, and that shape how you experience the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I appreciate and love about Pam is it took my family a long time to trust her, and she stayed with it. She never flinched from it. She always showed up. Always. And that's how I know that she has the strength, right? Because my family's like, who is this white girl? And really, how long is she going to hang? How long is she going to stay around? And she outlasted them. She outplayed them.
It's a valid question, right? It's a
really valid
It's a super valid question. Yeah. And I appreciate that too, about them, about just, right, the fierce way that they protect you and that they just are really, really very discerning about who it is that they give their trust to and who is worthy of trust. Right. That's what I was teasing my sisters-in-law the other day and my husband's cousins, where it's been a similar journey. And it's the same as them. They were always very gracious, right? So everybody was always, polite and kind, and your mom and grandma and sister, right, from the beginning, always, welcome me into their home. The same thing on my husband's side of the family. But it's different for what the feeling where you really can, develop a relationship where you really do have that trust. And, my sisters-in-law, it's been 15, 16 years in the making. And, we were laughing about it in that good way, where from a similar perspective, they're cautious. How many times have they seen people, white women, right, walk into relationships and just stay for a short period of time, and they have no idea, right, what way I was
or expected to be considered as a part of that relationship.
Right. Exactly. What is this dynamic and what's it going to be like? And, just really taking the time. Same thing with my bonus son, Jeffrey, my stepson, with his mom. We've also had a similar journey. And so having the patience, that's definitely been one of the deepest lessons of my life, is just to be patient. And I'm so thankful for my age of having the time where, I used to be more anxious about that, eager to please, having that feeling of, I'm the good white woman, and all those super harmful kinds of feelings you can have of, everybody immediately has to like me. Otherwise, there's something wrong with me or something wrong with them. And I just learned over time, it's perfectly okay, right? That I understand 100% why it is that people have discernment, why the lack of trust is there. I have no right to earn anybody's trust. And it's just, right, if I can show up and be respectful, right, over time, see if a relationship is meant to happen. But yeah, that's one of the things I think in family situations that you often see, where there's this immediate expectation of well, I'm a member of the family now, everybody has to have the trust there, and it's not given.
I asked Desiree this morning, she has these amazing Dear Sister cards, as you know, Pam, and I asked if she would pull one for us to see if there was any guidance. And I'm kind of struck by the commonality in this message from what you were just sharing. The card said, this journey to freedom will be long, bumpy, and painful, but that does not mean we should not walk it.
Oh, that's awesome. How perfect is that?
Wow, how perfect is that?
So I actually want to shift gears into both of your life journeys now a little bit and share with you what has become the guiding framework for me in my life and for Mother's Quest, which is this idea of living our own epic lives. And it came originally from a spark about the idea of the hero or heroine's journey. But for me, in motherhood, I had in many ways found parts of myself that I didn't know existed, but I also lost parts of myself and sidelined some of my own dreams. And so creating Mother's Quest was actually this way for me to step back into being the author of my own story and making sure that I was filling my life with the kinds of experiences and community and action that I felt when I look back on my life. And I often think of maybe sitting on a porch with my grandchildren and I'm telling them the stories of my life. It felt like it was rich and full and meaningful. So I'd love to hear first, just what you feel like your life journey has been about, each of you. And then we're going to delve into what I call the epic life guideposts, because epic is also an acronym mnemonic for the things that I think help us to live that kind of meaningful life, especially when we're raising our children. So I think, Desiree, let's start with you.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit in what ways you feel like your life has been a journey and what it's been defined by. And then I'd love to hear you share about this first guidepost, what you think your life journey has been about.
So my life journey, I have this bracelet that I wear always, and it hits where my pulse point is on my wrist. And it's the word liberation. And my journey has always been about liberation. It's been about liberation of me as a Black woman, liberation as me as a mom, and how I raised my children, liberation from a bad marriage at one point in time, and liberation around what is my work to do and what is it like for me to really own space and be free as I'm navigating a world that tells me I'm not. And so, I became a single mom when my youngest daughter, who's now 26, was 3, and my family has always been there for me. While I've been the main caregiver for my 2 daughters, I was never alone. I've always had family and friends like Pam and other really good folks in my life who helped me raise these amazing women. So I didn't do it all on my own. I've always had them, to help, again, shore me up, help give me advice, just to listen when I need it, to help bear witness to whatever journeys that my children were on, to be a guidepost and a compass for my children when they needed more than just me in their lives. It's been this great journey to raise them on my own predominantly. And it's been a very beautiful, such a divine gift for me to be able to bear witness as they become these adult women who I look at and think, how the hell did that happen? There's no way that I, they were definitely came through me, but they are not of me. There's something way beyond anything that I was capable of creating.
Well, I feel like that's a great segue to hear your reflections on the first epic guidepost, E, which stands for engaged, and it is about being mindfully engaged with our children. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you have done that, as you raise them, but then also now as you have adult children.
Well, when they were younger and I was parenting on my own, I made up, I knew that I only had so much capacity, and that capacity was around working and taking care of them and really being there for them and present for them and grounded for them. And, I look back and I'm like, I don't know if this was the right choice or the wrong choice, but it was my choice. I chose not to have an intimate relationship that I brought into my children's life. I just didn't have the capacity to care for them, do work that I needed to do to care for them and care for myself, and then also have room to be in an intimate relationship with somebody else. I didn't see how I could do all those things. And so I made a very conscious choice that I wouldn't bring that into my home. And so my children are now 29 and 26. And they kind of laugh because they're like, we know you date and we know you dated, but they've never seen me with anybody. They have as adults now, but I just didn't bring that into the house. And I struggled with that a lot. But I felt like I had to be fully present for them so that I could give them what they needed so that they could thrive. And I have no regrets about that. There are parts of me that wish they would have seen me in a really beautiful, strong, intimate relationship. But I don't have regrets about making them being fully present and connected to what they needed when they needed growing up.
Yeah. So my big takeaways from how you have connected with your children are, one, really honoring them as coming through you, but being their own individuals.
Absolutely.
And then also just how much consciousness you brought, especially in those years when you were raising them, about how to really be fully present and how much capacity you had.
And being honest, what would have been sacrifice?
Yeah.
And part of them would have been sacrifice as a part of that. And I know that. And I actively made the choice not to do that.
Thank you for sharing all of that. Pam, I would love to shift gears now and hear a little bit about your life journey. And then if you can delve into the next guidepost, P, which stands for passionate and purposeful, and that is about your impact in the world beyond your family.
Yeah, I do just have to say one comment to that, which is interesting. I hadn't thought about it till now. And I know whenever I think about it or Desiree thinks about it, it's always just that happened to be the choice that you made, right? Like yourself at that time that was right. That was the same choice my mom made. And I was like, oh, that's maybe another point, right? And I know, as you said, that I know the sacrifice that's involved in not having an intimate relationship. But my mom did the same thing. First of all, I was horrible. So I was terrible to any poor fool who wanted to have a date with her. Like they hated me. They probably still are in therapy about how awful I was. And there's people, of course, every day who make a different choice, which is beautiful, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like if the perfect partner is not showing up, I think that's part of what I recognize that I appreciate so much about what my mom did, as much as I know it was a challenge and everything she did to raise us. Like I saw you raise your girls. She absolutely supported my brother, sister, and I in really becoming like fully realized, healthy, happy humans, right? And like we all are doing well and enjoy what we do in life. And so I just appreciate that. And I can kind of see that point of connection. It's probably always why I'm like, and my mom met her then partner who she 22 years when she was 55, right?
That's
so
right. I got 2 more years to meet my partner. Exactly.
I got 2 more years.
I totally always look at your mom as my idol in that. Yeah.
I know, because then she had a wonderful marriage, you know. So yeah,
for 25 years.
Somebody made a different choice. But okay, so on to my path. I think my path has really been one, when I look at it, of community building. And it was actually my degree in college was international service and development. And I have always been interested by it. And per classic things that every career coach like me and Desiree will tell you, that when you begin to pay attention to things that you naturally do without even thinking about it, that are just part of every experience you have, for me, it is in consciously and actively building community, connecting people with each other. And I've always been interested in how, as a lens of change and transformational change, of how important that community is in that process. So it's probably why I was drawn to World College West. You know, it had a very small, intimate community. I laugh sometimes when I hear people describe college experiences of sororities and fraternities and sports teams. Like we had none of that. We were literally sitting around 2 a.m. talking about Foucault and like the praxis of knowledge is power. And like we were the most nerdy people in the universe, but I loved that because it was such a deep, intimate community. And then as I went through time, in my 20s, I guess, is when I got really involved in capoeira, the Afro-Brazilian martial art, and was the volunteer executive director of that group and just did tons of work of local community development within the arts and building a youth program and partnerships. And that was just a huge passion for many years. And then looking at what I did then online as I built my platform, it's something now that I recognize I'm so excited by every day. It's why we opened up this learning lab here in the last 3 years in my local community. But it's also something I feel really proud of, just like somehow matching what it is that I'm doing in my work with real core skills that I have. And I've definitely worked on building a lot of the skills, but a lot of it is also just things I'm naturally going to do that get me really excited. And I always tell my clients, I'm like, say whatever you want about me, but I have excellent taste in people. Like when I look around, Desiree always knows she's a poor, like, so where did you meet that person? Oh, I forgot. Tell me, where did you meet that person? She's like, you. I'm like, yeah, good point, exactly. Like, and so I can tease her and like, she knows I'm really obnoxious. I don't always do it in public, but I love that. Like, I just love the fact that that is like something I get to do every day. And I love it very much.
Yeah, it is true. Some of the best people in my world you introduced me to. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's some magical chemical, like the sixth sense. Like I see dead people, I see awesome people. I just can tell. I'm like, oh, you, like across the room.
You really do.
I do. I'm like, I'm going to own that. So in some ways, I think that's linked when I think of this passionate purpose. It's really how it is that I'm wired. For many years, I had all kinds of judgments about myself of why I'm not more like my sister, who's so smart and so dedicated and just is like Desiree. Oh my gosh. if there's an assignment that's due, she'll do it like 2 days before and get everything done on time. And she's not, doing things last minute like me, or being super smart like my brother, who's an isotope geochemist, who went to graduate school. And I used to look at all these things as, why can't I just be more disciplined? Why is it that I have to have such a strong feeling of purpose for what I'm doing in order to do it? Because the reality is, in life, there's a lot of things we just have to do that just need to get done. And Desiree is just excellent at that. She always has been consistently. She will do what needs to get done without complaint. And then she also adds the layer of making sure that her work is more and more tied to purpose over time. So that is something that I've worked on an ongoing basis. It becomes critical for me to be doing work that I'm passionate about, given the fact that that's the way that I'm wired. Because if I'm not in an ideal work situation, it's going to be much harder for me to get stuff done. And so it's meant that I've been able to do work that's very meaningful to me, to make a real impact in the areas where I want to be impacting. And then I think the balance of it is, and maybe in relation to parenting, it is part of kind of work I do beyond, but I don't really see it as beyond parenting. Like, I see it as an integrated perspective of how my family understands the work that I do. And then also how I am honoring the needs of my family. And like Desiree is saying, making sure I can get carried away of working all the time and just always being focused on what needs to get done. And I'll catch myself saying things like, I'm really busy, I wish we could do this, but we can't, I need to continue working. And when I'm constantly saying that, then I try to catch myself and recognize that I'm not really prioritizing time with my family. And the cause, for whatever the cause may be, is always going to be bigger than if I spent, 100% of my energy all the time just on that. It would never be enough. So that's kind of where my family helps keep me straight.
I resonate with so much of your journey, and I'm so grateful to know you now. For this conversation was really this connection I saw between you and Desiree, and I'm more familiar with Desiree's work. But I mentioned to you before we hit record, I just listened to your interview with Jonathan Fields from years ago when you came out with this book called Body of Work. I just know I'm going to be wanting to read your work and learn more about your impact and your purpose.
There's nobody better at community building. Nobody. No human, I've yet to meet one, is better at her community building. She loves getting on a plane and talking to people. I'm like, who does that? And I'm a raging extrovert, but I'm like, I don't want to get on a plane and talk to everybody next to me. And Pam gets on a plane and speaks and chats with everybody surrounding her.
Pam, I have a question for you before we move on to the next guidepost. One of the things that I also like to talk about is something that I call an epic snapshot moment. And those are those moments where all the things that matter most to us or that we're really striving for in our life kind of come together. And I like to say high definition, full color. And we want to bottle up the moment and tap back into it whenever we can. The curiosity I had as you were talking about your work, but also your family, is whether you have found ways to be able to integrate work and family, and if you have a particular epic snapshot moment that might illustrate that.
Yeah. By design, my husband and I have definitely worked together to be integrating work and family. We've always tried to bring our kids with us wherever possible. If I'm speaking at an event or doing something local, to have them participate, even when they were really little. And we like to spend time together. So that's part of it, is just, being together. But also it's helping them to understand when they're in different contexts about how it is that they can show up and behave. And, every kid is wired differently, as you and I were talking before we started the interview, right? There's a whole bunch of factors that can contribute, I think, to how kids show up. And so for us, it's always been where they can understand that when we are in certain situations, and from my husband's side, he had a heavy equipment construction business for years that he did. And so where possible, he'd bring them out to the job site and where they could be aware of what he was doing. But then in recent years, he's really been doing full-time, being a stay-at-home dad, but also doing traditional ceremony, where as he was raised by his grandfather. And so they've always grown up in that environment where they know to be fully present and show up. and be aware of what's going on. And we've always talked to them, even at the time they were very little, about that experience, about what we were trying to do. I share with them, struggles I have going on with work, things I really love. And that, I think, just makes them more familiar with what we're doing. I find a lot of kids don't have any idea because parents are like, okay, I'm leaving work behind and I'm focusing on family. And they may forget that their kid actually may be interested to know what they actually do at work. So like our kids have been very involved in that process, so they know actually what it is. And then in the last 3 years, we opened up the Small Business Learning Lab. And one of the specific reasons behind it was around the lack of representation that we saw for Native American business experts and leaders that were being featured as experts at conferences and on panels and in leadership positions. And it's an issue, as we know, with leaders of color in general, but in particular for Native leaders, it's really an epidemic of, as Desiree has helped me to see, one of the pillars of white supremacy being invisibility. There's been a specific campaign to ensure that people think about Native people as being a people of the past. And so that's one of the main drivers that we had for opening up our space and really working with Native leaders and highlighting. So we had done a local event that was an entrepreneurship event. And I asked my friend Violet Duncan, who's an amazing artist and entrepreneur here locally, to be a speaker at the event. So she spoke at the event, and then I invited my daughter. She actually asked to miss school that day. And so she was the only child that was in the audience, but she was there in the audience with us. And when Violet was sharing about her own experience, she told a story of when she was 11 years old, which was the exact age that our daughter was at that time, and how she had gone to a meeting with her mom. Violet is Cree from First Nation from Canada. And so it was a meeting with the Canadian government about arts funding. And at 11 years old, she was in the meeting just with her mom, and she spoke up and she said, one of the reasons maybe why you don't see as many, because they were trying to get more Native people to be applying for funding and get it successfully. And she said, you're talking about these categories of art that is actually not reflective of the art that I see my relatives do. So they ended up, she said, where they extended the meeting by 2 days, and they had this whole deep discussion that she was participating in. And they ended up changing the way that they set up the funding structure with the Canadian government for the arts. And so it was so profound to see this connection between doing specific things in order to build relationships, to see the power of where my daughter could look on stage and see somebody that looks more like her than she looks like me, right? That comes from this lived experience as a powerful Native leader that talks about the importance of using your voice as an 11-year-old. It was one of those moments where I was just like really, really grateful for that experience and just recognizing how important it is to do that work and show up for it.
Wow. Talk about an epic snapshot moment.
And how ego-free are you that you can say, I know my daughter needs to see women that look more like her than look like me.
Well, I have an ego, and that's the reality, right?
But that's the reality. But what does it take for people to get to that point to say, you know what? I'd love to be able to spend more time with my kid and do all these things and be my kid's hero, which you definitely are. But I also have to make space so that Angie sees herself reflected. And that's going to come from women who are not me.
That's exactly right.
Well, I want to ask you now, Pam, the next guidepost I stands for invested in ourselves. And this is the guidepost about our own self-growth, our own self-care and learning. And so I want to build off of this inquiry that Desiree just shared about, what has it taken for you to get to this level of self-awareness and connection and confidence in yourself to be able to be the kind of parent, community builder, and friend that is so clear you are?
I think on one side, it's interesting because my learning style is very often learning through work itself and not necessarily just in higher education learning. I was just talking with Desiree, our mutual friend, Nicole, the other day about, degrees. And she was like, do you have a master's degree? And I was like, at different points I've thought about it. But really, I never could, at the point where I would have been doing it, the work that I was doing was so interesting and it was pushing me so much to learn that I couldn't imagine, first of all, spending a whole bunch of money to an institution to be learning things that were more hypothetical and weren't related to real life. And so for me, the very best way that I love to learn, I love to push myself in the edge for the work, is to be in relationship with amazing people and to be learning from them. And then there's this practice we've talked about just being open, because it's really important. I know for a fact that I do not have all the answers and that I need to have multiple people in my life that are helping me to do the work, just like I want to be in multiple people's life to help them do their work. And just having that openness and rigor of looking at work that way, and then also looking at parenting that way. There is no way that I could have it all figured out. Like, I have to learn from Desiree when I see what an exceptional job that she did as a parent and the way that she's raised these highly confident, amazing children. Like, I need to learn from her. And I am not a person of color. And so there's no way that I can be sharing that experience with my kids, right? So that's just kind of a point of view of being open to learn and having a fundamental belief that it is impossible for me to know I have to do it all myself. In a similar way, I think it kind of balances a little bit on the self-care side. And this is really supported by my husband. He's one of the people who has the most exceptional self-care of anybody I've known. Like anybody. Like, oh my gosh, he's so thoughtful about like taking time to really wash his face and like really moisturize well. You know, like he's teaching my kids this and I'm like, thank God, like, because I'm the worst if I, to be doing all of those things perfectly, right? Where I take all the time that I need to do all the self-care rituals. I'm not always the best at that. But there's two things that we're very united on, I think, on the family front. And one of them is where I also do not have to be solely responsible and I don't have to be, the perfect mom. We all take responsibility. Our kids have shared from the time they were little at being able to take care of themselves. They dress themselves at a young age, right? They can cook. And where I can step in and do that well, I will. But I have learned that it's really strong self-care to not just try to do everything all the time and just get massively stressed out by it. And then for certain things, like for having a monthly massage, that's where my husband has been really good. Like, that is essential. You must take time to be, taking care of yourself, your physical body. And I think the other side is with friendship. There's a lot of partners who could be threatened by me having such a strong relationship with Desiree as my best friend, but he's always like, I get the sense, right? You need to talk to her. If you want to go spend time with her, right? Great. No guilt. Just jumping on a plane and spending time with her where she needs me has always been supported. And to me, that's a really deep part of self-care.
So good. I'm just loving this image too of your husband, like taking such care in washing his face. I feel like that's not the typical image we have of men. And that's really
He could teach a master class. I'm telling you, nobody knows about moisturizing.
He cares for himself. And the expectation is that Pam's going to take care of herself in that very similar way.
That's right.
Desiree, I want to hear from you now on this last guidepost, C, which stands for connected. And this is about being connected to a strong support network so that we are not alone on our epic life journey. How have you built that for yourself?
Well, I'm an extrovert and I've done this for years, and there are people who are fascinated by it. I have about 10 people now. It's probably somewhere around 10 people that I talk to every day. Pam is one of them. Every day. I talk to Pam in the morning, normally as she's driving into work. I talk to my sister in the morning as she drives into work. I talk to both my children every day. Sometimes that's for 2 minutes. Sometimes that can be for an hour, just kind of depending on what they need and where they are. I talk to my friend Nicole just about every day.
I feel like I should just jump into, for everybody listening, that Nicole Lee has also played a really important role in the Mother's Quest community. I've interviewed her for the podcast in a conversation that was incredibly pivotal for me and work that I have gone on to do. She's a member of the Mother's Quest Facebook community.
Yeah.
As you're both mentioning her, I assume, Pamela, that was who you were referring to.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. One and only.
You just bring her incredible presence into the
Yeah. So I talk to Nicole just about every day. And if she doesn't hear from me, then, I get texts from her or her husband going, proof of life, where are you? I talk to my mom every day. I talk to my nieces every day.
Wow.
I talk to two of my colleagues and good friends, Jessica Fish and Erica Hines, who because they teach diversity as an asset with me. This is that group of mine that I talk to every day. Again, maybe it's through a text message, but more than likely it's a quick phone call. And every day it's a check-in. How are you? What's going on? What do you need? How can I help? From everyone. But it's not just to me, right? Like, they know when my mom is needing something, or when my kids are in need of something, or just all of that. And they've always been there for me. One of the things Pam won't tell you is, there are points in my life as a single parent where I was struggling financially and she wasn't. And, my kids' school uniforms happened because Pam bought them, right? And so it was no expectation whatsoever of anything is being owed. It's just that, your babies are my babies.
One of the big gifts that I got from my connection with Nicole Lee was this idea of authentic relationship and non-transactional relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really hearing that in really the thread of this whole conversation about really being in deep, loving connection, seeing each other fully, being there for each other, but not with expectation.
Yeah. And so I give that gift back, right? That was such a beautiful, loving gift to me. I have a friend, Heather Lane Talley, who her and her partner adopted a baby almost 2 years ago. And I've given them diapers via Amazon every month since they brought the baby home. And they were teasing me the other day. They were like, do you know, we've never actually paid for diapers. We've never gone out to the store and bought diapers because that Amazon box shows up every month. And they were like, that's just such an amazing gift. And it's such a little thing for me. It really is. Right? It's like maybe $30 and I don't have to think about it. It happens every month.
Wow.
But for them, they're like, we've never had to worry about not having diapers. And for me, that's what community does.
And that's right. And for the record, we've always said it's good our kids grew up at different ages because there have been recent times, right, where I'm like, need a little funds in the account, right? And it's like, because at different times in your life, you have different needs, right? And you have access to different resources. And so it's the way that you can help each other that's super, super important. It's really hard to do it all alone.
Yeah. And for me, that's part of why I do this, is because we shouldn't have the expectation that it happens alone. So Nicole Lee will tell you, I'm always like, okay, it's back to school time. What size are the girls wearing? Let me get their winter coats, or let me buy their boots this year, whatever that is. Because capitalism and white supremacy will tell you that you're supposed to be doing this on your own. And that's not true.
It's not true.
Wow.
Yeah. We're not supposed to be raising babies and children our own. That's what community is for. We are supposed to care for each other. And I think that's part of the reason why people can be disconnected from what's happening in these camps.
Yeah.
That those aren't our children. Those are absolutely our children.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. So at time of recording, we're all witnessing just the horror of so many people who are seeking asylum in our country and are instead being detained in cages. Yeah, it is absolutely heartbreaking. And, recently too, we saw the images of Mike Pence coming to see them and just like not connecting to people's humanity in any way whatsoever.
Yeah. One of my favorite Pam stories is before she had children, before she even was thinking about having children, she wanted to go to this event in Montana. Do you remember this? And you called me and you were like, can I borrow your children for a week to take them to camp?
I remember that. Yep.
And I was like, wait, what? And she was like, yeah, can I just take your kids? I really want to go to this camp that's happening in Montana.
And I need some kids.
I need some kids. I don't have any. So can I take your kids? And I was like, absolutely, you can take my kids for the week to go to camp. And she's like, my kids went there to camp for a week.
I love that. Desiree, I want to ask you, we haven't had a chance to talk that much about your work in the world. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more about how you are making an impact these days and how that relates to what you've just been sharing about this guidepost about community.
What have I been doing, Pam? Oh, I've been doing a lot of work within organizations around culture, right? And so how do we create our definitions of culture and not take this white supremacist capitalist one, which is handed down and which is the status quo, right? So which we're trained to accept as normal and standard and common. And so I've been doing a lot of work with individuals, but a lot of organizations around what are these cultural norms and which are the ones that we need to be dismantling and looking at and examining. Where should we have awareness around what power looks like and how power is being played out? And I saw this great quote this morning from Ayanna Pressley, the representative from the Boston area, who was just at the Netroots conference in Philadelphia this past weekend. There's a quote from Shirley Chisholm that says, if they won't let you at the table, bring a chair. And Ayanna's like, I'm just not going to bring any chair to sit at any table.
Yeah.
She's like, some tables have to be dismantled. So my work is about which of the tables are needing to be dismantled so they can be expanded, so they can be more inclusive, so they can be more equitable. I just don't want to be in a room. I want to be in a room that's built for me. And all of our organizations were built mainly by this white, rich, male, heteronormative image, avatar. And so which of those pieces work? Which of those pieces don't work and need to be switched out? And how do we create something not just that welcomes me, but was made for me? And that's where I've been spending a lot of my time in my work.
Yeah. And we'll make sure to link to your website or any pieces or things that you've written about this. This could be a whole podcast episode in itself. But I'm wondering if you were to share with us just like the first key or one key thing that you have found is essential in these organizations, or if we want to be doing this in our own communities and lives, what's the starting point?
I think the question is, who was your organization built by and who was it built for?
Mm-hmm.
Because that will help bring some awareness around maybe where our biases and our blind spots are.
Yeah. So just beginning to raise your own awareness about these questions. Thank you. Sadly for me, we are almost at the end of our time. I always end with acknowledgements where we get to share what we're all taking away from this conversation and time together. But before we do that, you also have an opportunity to give me and anybody else who's listening who wants to say yes, a challenge to help, bring into our own lives. What would you offer to me?
Well, I offer you the challenge that I offer most folks, which is if you are of a dominant identity and if you are white in this Western world that we live in, to take 6 months or 3 months and only read books by people of color and to listen to and have new voices come into your world, because you just won't be the same once you do.
Do you have a particular book that you would say, like, start here?
Nope. Just any genre that you enjoy reading. Only read books by folks of color.
Wow. I am definitely saying yes to the wanting to read books of people of color. And I'm noticing this inner tension around, but those are the only books I can read. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you could shine a little bit more light on that. That's probably something within me.
Right. It probably is this expectation. Like, are they going to be good enough? Am I going to connect with them? Are they going to be well written? Will I understand them? But the reality is the majority of books I read are not by folks of color. My entire existence on this planet.
I have a shorter answer. Yes.
Yes.
That's it. Just yes.
Yes.
Right? Where that's advice, then fully embrace it and take it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I think
that's it. End of story.
I will definitely spend some more time sitting with this, but I say yes. I say yes to 3 months.
Okay.
Thank you, Desiree, for the challenge. It's a challenge. And I can see I'm already like looking at what is happening inside myself. I think it's more about what am I missing out on? Like, oh, but what if I interview this person and they're not Black and I'm supposed to read their book? But I also really appreciate the push around like, no, you just say yes to this. And there is a lot to learn and uncover in that. So thank you. Pam, what about you? I'm going to give you the opportunity to offer something as well, if there's something you want to add.
I think for me on the community side, it's always in any situation, in a school situation, community, neighborhood, work, conference, ask yourself who is here, who's not here, and why aren't they here?
Yeah.
And when you begin to first just develop that level of awareness, the third question of why aren't they here is not one, if you are from the dominant culture, that you have the answers to. That's about a process of beginning to have deep engagement and discussion. And it's just probably the easiest way to start the conversation, to begin to outline the gaps that exist within so many areas of where we're really not representing the actual people who live in our community.
Yeah. Thank you. I say yes to that too. And I'll be sharing reflections and space for other people to share in my Facebook community. So we're at the end of our time, and I want to start with some of the things that I'm taking away from this experience, and then would love to hear from both of you before we officially end. So grateful to be in your presence, both of you, and to be touched by this incredible relationship that you have with one another. Some of the common themes that I heard as threads throughout is the power of being in, you said right, relationship, Desiree, and the other words that come to mind are authentic, non-transactional, generous relationships. The power of truly being known and seen, the power of bearing witness, the everyday commitment to show up and to be conscious about how you want to show up in relationships, and then really making space, even when it's uncomfortable to do so. So thank you for all of that.
Let me just say for me, it's always a deep, amazing reflection to have more time with Desiree. And often when we have somebody else who's thoughtfully interviewing us, to just begin to understand at a deeper level the way that components of our friendship that are really meaningful. And so I thank you, Desiree, always. And also for you, Julie, for asking the questions and holding space for us to do that reflection, because I always walk away with something that's really powerful with that. And, you know, just the importance of really being able to have open, honest conversations more about friendships and just how important that is. I think for everybody's life. I know men need friendships a lot too, but especially for women.
I would say that for me, it is always a gift to be reminded just how special Pam is to my life. I think, you know, we can take folks for granted, especially folks that we know have been there every day for 30 plus years. And so that's just been a really wonderful pause to just reflect on really how wonderful and beautiful and kind and generous, compassionate she is, and how lucky I am to have her as my best friend. But also just a reminder of how lucky I am to have all of those folks in my world that really support me and care for me and love me and have helped me raise my children. I did not do that on my own. I could not have done that on my own. And that community is such a core, vital part of my story. So I appreciate having that reflecting back to me.
Well, thank you to both of you for extending your community and sharing your lives and your gifts and your knowledge and your challenge with so many of us. And I look forward to sharing this conversation.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about the Mother's Quest community, head over to mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review, and help us spread the word. I want to end with some words to help light the way on your quest. Seize the day. Love your people. Honor your gifts. Until next time.